You know that feeling when you find a restaurant so good you almost don't want to tell anyone about it? That's what upstate New York does to people. Everyone talks about the same 5 or 6 towns, the same photos show up over and over on your feed, and meanwhile, there are entire villages sitting quietly along rivers and lakes that most people driving past never even slow down for. I spent weeks digging through maps, old town records, and way too many road trip forums to put together a list that actually means something. These aren't tourist traps dressed up as hidden gems. These are real places with real history. The kind of towns where the guy at the general store still remembers your order after one visit. By the time we get to number 1, you're going to want to grab your keys and just go. So stick around because this list only gets better as it goes, and the last spot on here might just be the most underrated town in the entire state. Let's get into it. Number 10, Hammondsport, Finger Lakes. Hammondsport sits at the bottom of Keuka Lake, and if you've never heard of Keuka, that's kind of the point. While everyone flocks to Seneca and Cayuga for their wine tours, Keuka quietly does its own thing in a Y-shaped lake that somehow manages to flow in 2 directions at once, which is something almost no other lake in the country can claim. The village itself was once voted the coolest small town in America, and honestly, once you spend an afternoon there, you get why. It's the birthplace of Glenn Curtis, a guy who basically raced motorcycles at insane speeds before turning his attention to airplanes and becoming one of the most important and most overlooked figures in early aviation history. The museum dedicated to him sits right in town and gives you this strange feeling that you're standing somewhere history actually happened, not just somewhere that put up a plaque about it. Around the lake, 5 different distilleries and dozens of small wineries dot the hillsides, and most of them are family-run operations where the person pouring your glass is also the person who planted the vines. If you time it right and hop on a seaplane tour, you get to see the entire Y shape of the lake from above, something that's genuinely hard to picture until you're looking down at it. Downtown is small enough to walk in 20 minutes, but packed enough that you'll want to spend half a day there anyway, stopping in shops, grabbing lunch by the water, maybe renting a boat for an hour, just to feel what the locals feel every summer weekend. It's not flashy. It's not trying to be Napa Valley. It's just a genuinely lovely little lake town that happens to have one of the most interesting histories in the state, hiding behind its quiet main street. Number 9, Lewiston, Niagara region. Everyone drives right past Lewiston on their way to see Niagara Falls, which honestly feels like a crime once you actually spend time there. It sits just 10 minutes from one of the most famous waterfalls on the planet, but almost nobody stops. That's exactly why it belongs on this list. The village runs right along the Niagara River, and the water here isn't calm, it's fast, dramatic, and honestly a little intimidating if you watch it long enough. Jetboat tours launch right from the docks and take you straight into the Class 5 rapids, soaking everyone on board while giving you a totally different perspective on the same river that feeds the falls. But Lewiston isn't just about the water. Its historic downtown has this old-world charm to it, with brick buildings, antique shops, and a genuine sense that this town existed long before it became a stop on the way to somewhere else. Fort Niagara sits nearby too, adding another layer of history that most visitors to the region completely skip. Art Park, a huge outdoor performance venue, hosts concerts and festivals throughout the summer, turning this quiet village into a surprisingly lively cultural hub for a few nights every season. What makes Lewiston stand out is the contrast. You're minutes from one of the most overrun tourist spots in the country, and yet the town itself stays calm, walkable, and refreshingly uncrowded. Grab lunch at one of the riverside restaurants, watch the boats go by, and you'll start to understand why so many people who actually know the area consider Lewiston the better half of any Niagara trip. It's proof that sometimes the best view of something famous comes from standing just far enough away from it. Number 8, Naples, Finger Lakes. Naples is the kind of town that builds an entire identity around one food item and somehow makes it work perfectly. This is the self-proclaimed grape pie capital of the world, and once you try one, you stop questioning the title. The tradition started back in the 1960s with a local baker who figured out how to turn Concord grapes into something magical between 2 layers of crust, and now the whole town leans into it every September during the Grape Festival, which pulls in tens of thousands of visitors for 2 days of wine, live music, and yes, an official contest to crown the greatest grape pie in the world. But food is only part of the story here. Naples sits at the southern tip of Canandaigua Lake, surrounded by rolling vineyards that stretch across the hillsides in every direction, and the views alone are worth the drive. Just outside the village, Grimes Glen hides two genuinely stunning waterfalls that most people south of Rochester know about, but almost nobody outside the region has ever heard of. It's an easy walk in, which makes it perfect if you want to pay off without a serious hike. The wineries here have deep roots too, with grape growing in this area tracing all the way back to the 1800s, making Naples part of the original foundation of what eventually became New York's massive wine industry. Wander Main Street on a quiet weekday and you'll find local shops, a handful of great little restaurants, and a pace of life that feels like it hasn't changed much in decades. It's a small town that knows exactly what makes it special and doesn't try to be anything else. Number 7. Little Falls, Mohawk Valley. There's something almost cinematic about the way Little Falls sits carved into the Mohawk Valley, squeezed between steep rock walls that make the town feel more dramatic than its size would suggest. This is where the Erie Canal does something remarkable. Lock 17 here lifts boats a full 40.5 feet, the tallest lift of any lock on the entire canal system, and watching a boat rise through it feels a lot bigger than the word lock makes it sound. Before this lock existed, boats had to pass through 4 separate locks just to get around the falls that give the town its name. So what you're looking at is basically a monument to solving a 200-year-old engineering headache. Beyond the canal, Moss Island sits right in the middle of town, home to strange circular potholes carved into solid rock by the river over thousands of years, along with cliffs that local climbers have been quietly using for decades. The downtown itself has this rustic, almost forgotten charm, with old stone buildings and a genuine small-town feel that hasn't been polished up for tourists. It even made a brief cameo in a major horror film a few years back, when the director scouted locations and fell for the town's cozy, slightly eerie charm without even meaning to use it that way. Little Falls sits close enough to Utica and Herkimer that you could easily pair it with a longer Mohawk Valley trip. But on its own, it gives you canal history, natural swimming holes, dramatic rock formations, and a walkable downtown all packed into a town most people speed past on the highway without a second thought. Before we keep going, if you're the kind of person who actually wants to visit places like this instead of just watching them on a screen, drop a comment with the town from this list you'd hit first. I read every single one, and it genuinely helps me figure out what to cover next. Number 6. Sharon Springs, Mohawk Valley. Back in the 1800s, Sharon Springs was actually a big deal. Wealthy travelers from across the country came here for the sulfur springs, believing the mineral water had healing properties, and the town built itself around that reputation with grand hotels and bathhouses that pulled in serious money for decades. Then, like a lot of these old spa towns, it slowly faded once tastes changed and travel got easier. For a long time, it sat quiet, almost forgotten, its historic buildings aging in place while the rest of the world moved on. What makes Sharon Springs worth talking about now is the comeback. Over the past couple decades, people have been slowly restoring the old buildings, including the American Hotel, a beautifully renovated inn from the 1840s that still anchors the center of town. The historic district holds well over 100 buildings connected to that original bathhouse era, and walking through it feels a bit like stepping into a town that time genuinely paused on for a while. There's a faint mineral smell that still lingers in parts of the village, a strange but oddly charming reminder of what originally put this place on the map. A reality show about a couple of guys who left the city to raise animals and vegetables put the town back in the spotlight a few years ago, and it's brought a steady trickle of curious visitors ever since. The Sharon Springs Museum, set inside an old schoolhouse, tells the fuller story of the baths and the town's rise and fall better than any plaque ever could. This is a place that was once glamorous, went quiet, and is now slowly finding its footing again. And there's something genuinely satisfying about watching a town rebuild its own story. Number 5, Seneca Falls, Finger Lakes. Here's a fun bit of trivia most people don't know. The town that's widely believed to have inspired Bedford Falls in that famous holiday movie everyone rewatches every December is a real place, and it's sitting right here in the Finger Lakes. Locals point to a bridge in town where a man once jumped in to save someone from drowning, eerily similar to a moment from the film, along with architecture and a general layout that lines up suspiciously well with the fictional town on screen. The director apparently visited the area before making the movie, and while nothing's ever been officially confirmed, the town has fully embraced the connection, building an entire museum around it and hosting a festival every December that pulls in fans from all over the country. But reducing Seneca Falls to one Christmas movie sells it short. This is also the birthplace of the American women's rights movement, where the first women's rights convention was held back in 1848, an event that reshaped the entire course of the country's history. The National Historical Park here preserves that story with genuine care, and walking through it hits differently than a typical museum stop. The town itself sits along a canal with old industrial buildings that have been converted into shops and restaurants, giving the whole downtown a lived-in, authentic feel rather than something built for tourists. Visit in December and you'll catch the full festival energy, with actors from the original film sometimes making appearances, actual snow usually cooperating, and a town that leans fully into its identity without feeling forced about it. Visit any other time of year, and you get a quieter, more reflective version of the same place, one deeply tied to a pivotal moment in American history. Number 4, Ellicottville, Western New York. If you only think of upstate New York as flat farmland and lake towns, Ellicottville is going to surprise you. Tucked into the hills of what locals call the Enchanted Mountains, this village runs almost entirely on ski season energy for half the year, with 2 full resorts, Holiday Valley and Hollymont, drawing skiers and snowboarders from Buffalo, Cleveland, and even parts of Canada. But here's the thing most people miss. Ellicottville doesn't shut down when the snow melts. Summer brings hiking, mountain biking, a genuinely thrilling mountain coaster that winds through the trees, and a downtown that stays just as lively without a single ski lift running. The village itself looks like something out of a holiday movie set, with 19th century buildings lining the main street, small breweries pouring their own beer, and boutique shops that feel curated rather than mass-produced. The Ellicottville Brewery gives weekend tours where you actually learn how the beer gets made before sitting down to try it yourself, and the Arboretum just outside town offers a quiet, almost meditative contrast to the more adrenaline-heavy activities the area is known for. Every fall, the town throws a massive festival celebrating the changing leaves, turning Main Street into a packed, colorful, genuinely fun weekend that locals plan their entire autumn around. What sets Ellicottville apart from most ski towns is that it never feels like it's only built for one season or one type of visitor. Families come for the tubing hill, thrill seekers come for the Black Diamond runs, and everyone else comes just to wander a genuinely charming small town that happens to sit in one of the most scenic pockets of Western New York. Number 3, Hudson Valley. Hudson has this reputation now as the place where New Yorkers go when they want a weekend that feels like an entirely different world without a long drive. Warren Street runs straight through the middle of town, lined with antique shops, art galleries, and restaurants that would honestly hold their own in a much bigger city. What makes it interesting is the contrast between old and new. The buildings themselves date back centuries, with architecture that survived the city's earlier days as a busy whaling port of all things, back when Hudson was actually one of the most important towns on the entire river. Walk down Warren Street today, and you'll pass a mix of families who've lived here for generations and creative types who've moved in over the past couple decades, drawn by the historic buildings and the slower pace, all sharing the same handful of blocks without much friction. The train from New York City drops you right in town, which has made Hudson a weekend escape for people who want a real change of scenery without renting a car. Beyond the main strip, the town sits right on the Hudson River, with views out toward the Catskill Mountains that catch you off guard if you're not expecting them. Antique hunters could genuinely spend an entire day here without running out of shops to dig through, and the food scene punches well above what you'd expect from a town this size. What used to be a quiet, somewhat overlooked river town has become one of the more talked about small cities in the entire region, but it's managed to hold on to its character while doing it, which is rarer than it sounds. If you've made it this far, you already know this list is only getting better, so go ahead and hit subscribe now, because the last two towns on here might genuinely be some of the most beautiful spots in the entire state, and you're not going to want to miss how this one ends. Number 2, Cold Spring, Hudson Valley. Cold Spring is one of those places where you get off the train and immediately understand the appeal. It sits directly across the Hudson River from West Point, and the views from town look almost unreal, with the military academy's stone buildings rising up on the opposite bank against a backdrop of green hills that seem to change color with every season. Main Street runs downhill straight toward the river, lined with antique shops, small bookstores, and cafes that feel personal rather than corporate, the kind of places where the owner is usually behind the counter. The town started as an industrial hub back in the 1800s, home to the West Point Foundry, which supplied cannons during major conflicts and helped shape the town's early identity, long before anyone thought of it as a weekend getaway. Today, that history sits quietly in the background while the town has reinvented itself as one of the most popular short trips out of New York City, easily reachable by train in about an hour, which explains why so many people treat it as their go-to weekend reset. Hike up nearby a breakneck ridge, and then you get one of the best panoramic views in the entire Hudson Valley. Though be warned, it's a genuinely tough climb that catches a lot of people off guard. Down by the water, a small park gives you a much calmer way to take in the same scenery, perfect for anyone who wants the view without the workout. What makes Cold Spring stand out isn't one single attraction, it's the whole package. A walkable downtown, serious natural beauty right at its doorstep, and a river view that genuinely never gets old, no matter how many times you've seen it. Number 1, Rosendale, Hudson Valley. And here it is, the town that genuinely earns the top spot on this entire list. Rosendale used to be a booming cement town back in the 1800s, and not just any cement town. The natural limestone found here got used to build some of the most famous structures in American history, including the Brooklyn Bridge and the base of the Statue of Liberty, which is a wild fact considering how few people outside the area even know Rosendale exists. When the cement industry eventually collapsed, the town could have just faded away like a lot of former industrial spots did, but instead it reinvented itself into this quirky little community full of artists, musicians, and people who wanted an authentic small town without giving up character or culture. The real showstopper here is the Rosendale Trestle, a 940-foot bridge that towers 150 feet above Rondout Creek, originally built for trains back in the 1870s and now converted into a walking and biking path with views that stop people in their tracks every single time. Walking across it feels genuinely different from most scenic overlooks, mostly because you're suspended that high above the water with nothing but open air and old steel trusses around you. Right near the entrance sits a small cave you can actually explore, a leftover from the old cement mining days that adds this unexpected layer of adventure to what's already a stunning walk. The trail connects to the larger Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, so if you're into biking, you can easily turn a quick visit into a much longer ride through some genuinely gorgeous countryside. Downtown Rosendale keeps that same offbeat energy, with a mix of creekside shops, a cozy countryside inn, and a community that clearly values keeping things a little weird in the best possible way. This is a town that took a collapsed industry and turned it into one of the most photogenic spots in the entire Hudson Valley. And honestly, once you see the trestle in person, you'll understand exactly why it earned the number 1 spot. So that's the list. 10 towns across upstate New York that most people drive right past without ever knowing what they're missing. If any of these caught your attention, do yourself a favor and actually plan a trip, because photos and video genuinely don't do half of these places justice. Let me know down in the comments which one surprised you the most. And if you want more videos like this covering the parts of New York that never make it onto the typical travel lists, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.